Good morning, students. Welcome to SST So Simple tutorial. Today we are here to discuss section 1, lesson 3, Nationalism in India of your NCERT textbook. We have already read about the nationalist movement in India in class 8. We have already read the reasons of the emergence of nationalism. The Indian national movement expressed the aspirations and demands of the people of India, bound together by their identity as a nation and the spirit of nationalism. It was intimately connected to the anti-colonial movement. People had begun discovering their unity in the process of their struggle with colonialism. The sense of being oppressed provided a shared bond that tied many different groups together. Further, Mahatma Gandhi also tried to forge these groups together into one movement. In this lesson, we will pick up the story from the 1920s and study the non-cooperation movement and the civil disobedience movement. Let's start First World War, Khilafat and non-cooperation movement.
The First World War started in 1914. India was not directly involved in the war. In fact, India had nothing to do with the war. We were simply a British colony. But the British government was a participant in the war and he made us an indirect participant. Now, to fight a war, we need a lot of money. Where shall the money come from? Defense expenditure had increased, so it was financed by war loans. Custom duties were raised and income tax was introduced. Prices of essential commodities increased, almost doubling between 1913 and 1918. This led to extreme hardships for the common people. The problem did not stop here. Britishers were fighting the war, but who shall fight for them? Needless to say, the poor Indians. That means forced recruitment. They forced our people to join army. Naturally, this caused widespread anger in rural areas. Unfortunately, crops also failed in many parts of India. As a result, there was acute shortage of food. As we know, problems never come alone. The crop failure was accompanied by an influenza epidemic. Around 12 to 13 million people perished due to famine and epidemic.
Let's now come to another subtopic, the idea of Satyagraha. Mahatma Gandhi returns to India from South Africa in January 1915. He has already done the experiments of Satyagraha in South Africa, having led Indians there in non-violent marches against racial restrictions. This is what he is going to use to oppose the Britishers here. Before that, let us see what is Satyagraha. In simple words, Gandhiji's policy of non-violent resistance is called Satyagraha. It was a novel method of mass agitation. The essence of his Satyagraha was to oppose the wrong without hurting the oppressor. Even while resisting evil, he would love the evil doer. A true Satyagrahi would not show any signs of hatred. Mahatma Gandhi spent his first year in India traveling throughout the country, understanding the people, their needs and overall situations.
In 1916, he went to Champaran in Bihar, defying the British orders to inspire the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation system. In 1917, he organized a satyagraha to support the peasants of Kheda district of Gujarat. They were affected by crop failure and a plague epidemic. so they could not pay the revenue. They were demanding the revenue collection be relaxed. Do you see the word epidemic here in bold? Can you tell the difference between epidemic and pandemic? The word that is heard everywhere today? An epidemic is a disease that affects a large number of people within a community or a region. That means it is localized. It is called pandemic when it spreads over many countries or continents. That means so long COVID-19 was limited to Wuhan only, it was an epidemic. Now, since it has spread all over the world, it has become a pandemic. Let's now come back to Satyagraha. In 1918, Mahatma Gandhi went to Ahmedabad to organize Satyagraha movement amongst cotton mill workers. The workers were protesting for better wages. The British had to increase the wages with reforms in working conditions.
Let us now discuss another subtopic, the Rowlatt Act. In 1919, the British government passed Rowlatt Act. It was passed hurriedly by the Central Legislative Assembly despite united opposition of the Indian members. It gave government enormous powers to repress political activities. It authorized the government to imprison any person without trial for 2 years. Gandhiji, Jinnah and others criticized the act as devilish and tyrannical. Gandhiji asked the people to observe a hartal on 6th of April. Hartals and protest movements were held all over the country. Workers went on strike, shops closed down, but they were largely restricted to towns. The British government got scared at this. On 10th April, the police fired upon a peaceful procession in Amritsar, which provoked widespread attacks on banks, post offices, railway stations. Martial law was imposed in Amritsar and General Dyer took over the command. On 13th April, a crowd of villagers had come to attend a fair gathered in enclosed Jallianwala Bagh. They were unaware of the martial law. General Dyer entered the area, blocked the exit point and opened fire on the people, killing hundreds. This incident is known as Jallianwala Bagh incident in Indian history. As the news of the incident spread, crowds took to the streets. There were strikes, clashes with police and attacks on government buildings. The government responded with brutal repression. They humiliated the people, they terrorized the people, they forced the satyagrahis to crawl on the streets, rub their noses in the ground and to do salam to all the sahibs. Seeing so much of violence, Gandhiji called off the movement. While the Rowlatt Satyagraha had been a widespread movement, it was still limited to the towns and cities. Gandhiji wanted to make it a still more broad-based movement in India. But he knew this was not possible without bringing Hindus and Muslims together. The World War had just ended. Ottoman Turkey was defeated. There were rumors that a harsh peace treaty was going to be imposed on the emperor, that is, the Khalifa. Muslims were not happy. So a Khilafat committee was formed in Bombay by two brothers, Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali. Gandhiji saw an opportunity here to bring both Hindus and Muslims together. So he supported the movement. At the Calcutta session of Congress in September 1920, he convinced the Congress leaders the need to start a non-cooperation movement in support of Jallianwala Bagh incident, Khilafat movement as well as Swaraj. Many members within the Congress were reluctant to boycott the council elections scheduled for November 1920 and they feared that the movement might become violent. There was therefore intense tussle within the Congress on the issue. But finally, at the Nagpur session of Congress in December 1920, the Khilafat non-cooperation movement program was adopted. Gandhiji got the green signal to start the movement. He proposed that the movement should unfold in stages.
It was decided to begin with the renunciation of titles that Indians had received from the British. Rabindranath Tagore had already renounced his knighthood. Gandhiji returned his Kaisar-e-Hind medal. This was to be followed with a boycott of civil services, army, police, courts, legislative assemblies and schools. Then a boycott of foreign goods. In case government used repression, then a full civil disobedience movement.
This brings us to the close of the lesson. But before we close, let's have a recap.
Now let's have a recap of the lesson. We begin with the First World War and see how it creates a new economic and political situation. We find increase in custom duties and introduction of income tax. We also see forced recruitment in rural areas. We also see the hardships caused to the people due to crop failure and epidemic. In 1915, we see Mahatma Gandhi returning from South Africa and organizing satyagraha movements in various parts of the country. In 1916, we see him going to Champaran in support of peasants against the oppressive plantation system. In 1917, we see Mahatma Gandhi going to Kheda in support of the peasants who were affected by crop failure and a plague epidemic. In 1918, we see Mahatma Gandhi going to Ahmedabad in support of cotton mill workers. In 1919, we see the British government passing the Rowlatt Act, which authorized the government to arrest any person without reasons for 2 years. Then we find people opposing this act from all corners through hartals and protest meetings. In the same year, we also see Jallianwala Bagh incident happening, where General Dyer kills hundreds of innocent people. Then we see Mahatma Gandhi coming in support of Khilafat movement. In September 1920, at Calcutta session of Congress, Mahatma Gandhi convinces the leaders the need to start a non-cooperation movement in support of Khilafat movement as well as for Swaraj. In December 1920, at the Nagpur session of Congress, we find that the non-cooperation program of Mahatma Gandhi was adopted and Mahatma Gandhi got a green signal to start his campaign. Students, now you should be able to answer these questions. How did First World War help in the growth of nationalist movement in India? We have discussed this in the beginning of the lesson, where we have discussed about the custom duties, we have discussed about the income tax, we have discussed about the forced recruitment. In addition, you can add the short supplies of food due to the crop failure and epidemic. You will get this answer in page number 54. So please go through your textbook. Question number 2. When did Mahatma Gandhi return from South Africa? So Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa in 1915. This you will get as a 1-mark question. Third, explain the idea of satyagraha. The idea of satyagraha is also discussed by me. You can go through page 54 to read it in detail about satyagraha. We have already discussed it as the Gandhiji's policy of non-violent resistance. How did Mahatma Gandhi successfully organize satyagraha movements in various places just after arriving in India? In this question, you have to mention 1916 Champaran, 1917 Kheda and 1918 Ahmedabad. You will get this answer in page 55. Question number 5. What was Rowlatt Act? Rowlatt Act is mentioned in your book in page number 55. Rowlatt Act, as we have read, it was an act which was passed hurriedly by the Assembly. Indian members opposed it. It gave enormous powers to repress political activities, and it authorized the government to imprison any person without trial for 2 years. Next question. How did Indians show their disapproval towards this act? We have seen the disapproval. We have seen the hartals and strikes. This is what you have to read and write and prepare the answer. How did the colonial government react to the popular upsurge? As a reaction to the action of the people against the Rowlatt Act, the colonial government also reacted. We have seen it has forced the people to crawl on the streets, to rub their nose, to do salam to the sahibs, and all these things you have to mention here as a reaction to the popular upsurge. Explain Jallianwala Bagh incident. This is a very easy question. You go to Amritsar. You have to write the story of Jallianwala Bagh, where people had gathered. You have to mention General Dyer. You have to mention about the martial law which was imposed in Amritsar, and then you have to write how people gather there. Dyer comes there and he opens fires on the innocent people. This is what you have to write in question number 8. It is mentioned in page number 56. Question number 9. When did Jallianwala Bagh incident take place? It took place on 13th of April. This is again a 1 mark question. What was Khilafat movement? In order to explain this Khilafat movement, it is better if you write something about Ottoman Turkey, about the defeat of Ottoman Turkey in the First World War by the Allies. And thereafter we have already discussed how there was a plan, there was a rumor that some sort of harsh treatment may be meted out to the emperor or that Khalifa, and therefore the Muslims were annoyed with this, so they were opposing. So all these things you explain in the Khilafat movement. Next question. Why did Gandhiji consider it important to support the Khilafat movement? This is an important question. After the Rowlatt Satyagraha, Mahatma Gandhi realized that it was still limited to the towns and cities, and he wanted to make it a still more broad-based movement in India. But it was not possible without Muslims and Hindus coming together. So this is what you have to write in this question properly. Who authored the book Hind Swaraj? I missed this in my lecture. Hind Swaraj was written by Mahatma Gandhi. Again, it is a 1 mark question. Why was non-cooperation movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi? Mahatma Gandhi had launched this non-cooperation movement against that Jallianwala Bagh incident to support the Khilafat issue as well as to get Swaraj. You have to explain this. This is mentioned in page 56. Next question. What were the stages of non-cooperation movement? The stages of non-cooperation movement, as we have discussed before, it was to unfold in stages, beginning with the renunciation of titles, boycott of schools, colleges, assemblies, boycott of foreign goods, and finally, in case the British government goes for repression, a final civil disobedience movement. This is mentioned in page 57. Please go through it in detail.
When did non-cooperation movement begin? Which all various social groups participated? What were their aspirations? All these details in the next subunit that we will take in the next class. Thank you.